Imagine being a wild and crazy teenager, a busy college student, or a sports reporter with a hectic schedule. Now imagine having to juggle all of that in every stage of life with type 1 diabetes. Jake Sorich, today's guest, is here to share his crazy tales, interesting adventures, and advice, and his story that came from being diagnosed and living with type 1 diabetes. Well, I Googled you after we met
you did?
in Great Falls.
Uh-oh.
And I went, holy cow, you wrote this book about the Cabbage Patch.
I did, yeah.
And I'm like, oh, had I known that, because I'm from the Butte area too. And I know about the Cabbage Patch. I love Butte history. And so is it still available to buy? Is it still out in the world?
We have it. Yeah, you can get it. Bookstores in Butte have it. We have a website, oldbuttepublishing.com. And it's available there, as well as my second book on the M&M.
And when did that one come out? Was that
came out, and so the Cabbage Patch came out in 2020, and M&M was 2021, right after. So it burned down in May of 21, and I finished the book in November of 21.
Do you have another book in the works? Are you working on anything?
I'm switching gears. I'm doing a fiction book. Thought I'd mix it up a little bit. But my grandpa's also getting me on a different project that could be a book. So stay tuned, I guess.
Awesome. I could sit here and talk Butte history with you all day long. My coworkers know how crazy I am about Butte, so I'd still consider it home. But you became a newspaper man in Butte, right?
I had been a newspaper person before, yeah. So I graduated from University of Montana with a degree in journalism. I was the sports editor of the Kaiman, the student newspaper there. And then I wanted to be a sports reporter because I loved sports. I still love sports. And I thought, well, if I can't play sports, I can write about them. So that was always my first goal. And that's why I went to college, to become a sports journalist. And then I got a job in Anaconda as a sports reporter. I decided that, yeah, I still want to be a journalist, maybe just not sports anymore, so I can let that be my passion and just kind of have that as my passion. So I moved to California. I got a job in Redding, California, and I was a copy editor there for about a year. Of course, it was also in 2007, 2008, and that was kind of a chaotic time for everyone.
Yes.
Yeah. So I got laid off from that job in early 2008. Then I got hired at the Great Falls Tribune, and I said I was never going to go back into sports, but it was a sports copy editing job. So I took that, and I thought, well, if I'm copy editing sports, I'm not writing about them, so I can still go to games and enjoy them.
And what does a copy editor do then, Jake, compared to being the journalist and writing?
It's kind of the back end. That's the less sexy work because your name's not on it and you're not writing about what's happening, but it's super, super important. It's basically ensuring that the product that goes out is accurate and it looks good and it's compelling. So I did that for about a year, and then I got laid off from that job too. But luckily enough, they were impressed with me, and they really thought I did a good job. So I got rehired a year later to be the hot ticket entertainment reporter here in Great Falls. And so I did that for about 6 years. Yeah, so that was my journalism career.
Yeah, and now you're in Great Falls working at the library. What do you do at the library?
I am the communications coordinator for the Great Falls Library, and I started in early September. So I promote the library, I do press releases, I do the social media, I do a lot of photos. So after we get done, like for instance, after we get done with this, I'm going to take photos. We're having an author here. We're giving a speech tonight. So I will be taking photos of her, and maybe I'll do a live video of just to kind of get a preview snippet of what's going on. So just basically my job is to promote what's going on at the library and all of the library services. Yeah.
Awesome. as I'm thinking about your whole journey here, you have type 1 diabetes.
Yes.
And so to me, that whole journey of being laid off multiple times, traveling, moving to Northern California, just seems like it would be so much more difficult. So how old, Jake, were you when you got diagnosed with diabetes?
I was a freshman in high school.
What kind of sent you to the doctor?
First thought it was a cold. I just thought I was real sick. And then I was just like, oh man, I feel like I'm sweating and my mouth tastes funny. I remember feeling tired when I shouldn't be tired. It's like I just woke up and now I'm tired. Why? And so what kind of brought me to the hospital, the doctor, I think, yeah, we went to the hospital. I had a paper route. So I was on my paper route at the time, and I was delivering, my dad was helping me. He was taking one side of the street, I was taking the other. And I got to this house. I was about to throw the paper and I collapsed into the yard. So I was just sitting there in the snow. I couldn't get up. I'm just like, I can't move. What's happening? I'm sick. What's going on? So my dad saw me because he was on the other end. He said, Jake, what's happening? And then he said, I need help. And then he took me up to the hospital and they ran some tests. And yeah, I think my blood sugar was like in the 500s or 600s or something. So it was they knew right away what was going on, and as I think most often happens, it's usually, you're not usually wondering if you're a type 1 diabetic, like especially when it happens like that. But yeah, so that was pretty much, okay, I have it. Now, what is it?
Did you end up having to be in the intensive care unit or anything like that for a while to get?
I think I was there it wasn't that long. It was for like a day. And, they just kind of got me back up and they made sure my numbers were fine. And, it was just kind of the standard what happens when you go to the hospital if you have an episode kind of thing. And they kind of explained what it was to me, and back, that was probably in the 90s. Yeah, it was in the 90s. So, a lot of the technology that is available now didn't exist. So I was taking injections and I was just, poking my finger and, which even to the early days when people were testing their urine, it had even been kind of a long time from then, but it's even the technology for diabetes has even come even further now from where it was then. So it's a lot to take in for anyone, but especially I think when you're in high school, you're dealing with all your regular high school stuff, and then you got this on top of it. So yeah, so it was a lot to kind of take in at first, but
yeah. And how did your family handle it? Like what did your parents do? Did you guys get some readily available diabetes education, or were they on the then internet with whatever limited stuff was there, or books, or what? How did your family react, and what did you guys do with this diagnosis?
it goes into kind of the breadth of you have the honeymoon phase, and then you have the realization phase of what you have, and then you have okay, this is my new reality type thing. So I think that goes for your family members as well. You have the first phase where like, well, maybe it's not so bad, and actually, oh, my numbers are okay now. Maybe this will be all right, and yeah, I'm gonna beat it, that kind of thing. But we were aware of that. The doctors, they had kind of given us a heads up that's kind of the normal progression to go through. But I think we really adjusted what we ate and made sure that I was already pretty rather active in high school. I did cross country and track. So, my exercising was never really, it wasn't like I was playing video games all the time or anything. I was a pretty active kid. So that wasn't a much of an issue. So I think it was knowing what it was and making some necessary adjustments. And I think it was harder for my family sometimes in that I knew maybe what I needed, but they kind of wanted to do as much as they could to know what they needed. And when you're a teenager, you don't want your parents, kind of over your shoulder looking at you and doing what you want all the time. So it was, that's kind of a natural kind of butting heads a little bit. And then with diabetes on top of that, it can, it was a little stressful at times because I would be like, well, no, I'm going to go eat this pizza and hang out with my friends and they're going to have beer and I'm going to drink, and my mom would be like, Jake, you first, you're only 16. You can't be drinking, that. And then you got your diabetes to contend with, so you shouldn't do that at all either. And so I was like, yeah, you're right. I wasn't much of an arguer,
At least you were a compliant classic teenager. I mean, so yeah.
Yeah, it was hard. It was definitely having it when you're a teen is hard, but having it whenever you have it is hard. I don't think there's an age where you have diabetes and it's somehow not as time consuming or all consuming to your life. So that answers your question.
Yeah. So did you ever have times where I don't know what I want to call them, like moments thanks to the diabetes, like major hypoglycemia where your blood pressure dropped? Has it thrown you for a roller coaster at all?
Yeah, where to start? I went to college and I was on my own. I think the first one, and I was thinking about this earlier today, I wanted to talk about this. I had a moment where I don't know if it was fate, I don't know what it was, but I was so lucky to survive. And I don't know how I did. And I just, if there's higher power, fate, God, whatever you want to call it. So I was going to a friend's house and they were just going to hang out there. And I was driving. I had an old car that I was driving and I could feel that my blood sugar was starting to drop. And part of it was I wasn't testing my blood sugar as much as I should have. I would go weeks and weeks without testing, which now seems, seems like, Jake, what the hell were you thinking? Like, why would you do that? But that's kind of how I thought I was invincible type thing. But so I could feel that my blood sugar was starting to drop. And I was like, oh, okay, I will go to the gas station. I'll drive to the gas station. I will get some Skittles. I got some Skittles. I pulled out of the gas station and I passed out. The next thing I remember is I was in the hospital room. That's the next thing I remembered. So, and what happened was and just talking about this, I don't know. I wish I could go back in time and shake myself sometimes. I honestly do. But I passed out while I was driving and I ran into a truck and someone saw the car on the side of the road. They called the ambulance. They brought me in the hospital. They got my blood sugar up and it was disturbing that, well, firstly, it was disturbing that looking at it now from my perspective now, that I would have let it get to that point where I would go so low and I would be so irresponsible to be driving when I was that low. That should never happen. I was probably, in the 20s, 30s, as far as my numbers go. I don't know.
And what's normal, Jake? What would be normal for people to know?
For normal numbers is like 80 to 180. But if I'm within that range, I like to be, 130 is like the dead set middle where I'm like, okay, I'm doing good. If I'm 180, might be on a little high side. And if I'm like 80, 70, I'm getting low. So anything below 80, you're like, uh-oh, this is trouble. This could be trouble. So at the hospital, they got me too. And they says, yeah, someone brought you in. You were in a car. The car had hit another vehicle and they got me back too. And then I didn't have a ride. I decided, and again, this was my 19-year-old self. You want to go back and shake, but I left the hospital. It was dark out. I left the hospital on foot and I was going to go find my car. So there was just a lot of coincidences that I could have been a lot worse. So I started walking and I thought I was walking towards campus in Missoula. Turns out I was walking the opposite way and someone randomly saw me walking and I still don't know why they stopped, because you never stop. And especially when it's dark out, you don't stop and say, hey, do you need a ride? a guy in a walking in a neighborhood, you don't stop and offer people a ride. Someone stopped and said, "Hey, do you need a ride?" And and I says, "Yeah, I need a ride back to my dorm." And they gave me a ride home when I was walking from the hospital back to campus. So much about that could have been so wrong, and like I made it okay. And then the next day I found my car. It hit the truck, but like didn't damage my car, and I hit the bumper, and the truck looked okay. So that was the worst. That was probably the worst, because I could have ended up dead. I could have been kidnapped. I could have, just been on the side of the road for 8 hours, or it was just so much had to go that way for me to make it. And I did. And I also had a friend who didn't make it. And my friend Katie, she was also a journalist in the journalism program there at UM, and she had type 1 diabetes. And she was fantastic. She got hired on the Kaiman as a freshman, and great writer, had really good imagination, and was just a really cool person. And she also had type 1 diabetes. And we kind of bonded over that, because I did too, and we'd watch out over each other or whatever. And but she had a situation in her dorm, and she died in her dorm room from her diabetes. And I took classes when I was really close with her, and I've seen it, the worst of it.
I dated a guy in college. He died at 25 from diabetic ketoacidosis. The same thing, grad school. He had been struggling with it for a couple days, couldn't seem to snap out of it. So it's a disease that can be managed, but it should never be underestimated.
Not at all. And it's and another thing I wanted to say is that it affects more than just your health too. It's your health, it's your relationships, it's your financial health. It's your entire being it can affect, and especially if you don't manage it, you can be just totally in despair, all because of your diabetes. And I've struggled at certain parts of my life with all of that. And it really is just when my grandma was alive, she always would say it's an insidious disease, and I wish nobody had it, and I'm sorry that you had it. And she would always kind of remind me that what you're going through is difficult, and it's not an easy thing to manage. And I think thankfully there's people who help. There's a lot of people who can help you, and there is support, and there's a lot of education. And I think the technology these days is a lot better than it's ever been. So it's difficult, and it's something I'm thinking about a lot always. And it's just, every day, every moment, it's like, oh, how's my numbers? And I was like, oh, I'm feeling tired. How are my numbers? Or, oh, I just walked, like I just went upstairs and downstairs, and I've got a little sweat. I should check my numbers. It's a every moment kind of thing. Because if you don't, you can potentially end up harming yourself.
Luckily, they used to be called diabetes educators, and now they're called diabetes care and education specialists. And every major hospital has them. A lot of our small clinics and hospitals have them. And if they don't have them locally, they can do virtual appointments with you. And they say there's 4 times to see a diabetes care and education specialist. If you've been recently diagnosed, annually at appointments, if you have any new complications, and then if you have any other life changes. And I know that can include something like moving. It can mean I switched my Medicare plans. You should see them to make sure that you're going to be on track with everything. With, I had to change medications and keep up on it. And they can provide a lot. Registered nutritionists, dietitians too, as far as eating and food. But it's hard enough for us to all go to the eye doctor once a year, which is something somebody with diabetes should do, especially because they're at higher risk for retinopathy. But then you start thinking, okay, you have to go for your annual appointment. You need to go for an eye doctor. And now somebody with diabetes, they need to go see an endocrinologist, if they can get into one, a doc that specializes in this. Diabetes care and education. Suddenly that's looking like a lot of time away from work, away from life.
Right. Well, it is. it's necessary. And I think what I wish, if I could go back in time and kind of change things, is I wish I took it more serious sooner, because I thought I was invincible, and I thought I was different, and I thought because I would get my A1C check and it would be 6.5, I thought, oh well, I'm doing great. But even like 5.8, and it would, but the reason it would be 5.8 is because I would be at 45 3 nights one week, and then I would be at maybe 50, and I would wake up and I'd be kind of groggy, or I'd have to crawl to the fridge to get a thing of milk, just so it was artificially low
Yes.
A1C,
Yes.
which
Yep.
doesn't mean that you're handling it well. It just means that you have the opposite problem as if you were not if you were on the higher end, and so don't think that you can do it on your own, because it's bigger than that, and it's tough to manage on your own. And there are resources out there and out there for a reason, because it is a difficult disease that really can take over your life if you don't
Yeah.
handle it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we're always learning more about it. Like you mentioned with A1C, which is kind of like an average
Yeah.
of the blood sugar. And so, yeah, you could be spiking super high, dropping super low. In my other career, I did ultrasound. And if you're a woman, you have major, major fetal complications in utero from those blood sugar spikes. And if your doctor doesn't realize to watch for those, instead of just looking at overall A1C, because it averages out and it can hide those spikes, you could be, missing something big. So Jake, do you have like one of those continuous glucose monitors? Are you using that now, or the modern technology available, or?
I was, and I will be again. I'm kind of between getting things filled, and with the new job and everything, just kind of adjusting the prescriptions and then what the insurance is going to pay, how much they're going to pay for it, all that fun stuff that you have to deal with. And I think that's one of my frustrations with the technology, is that it's amazing and we're making great strides in helping people with the continuous glucose monitor, which is great. I love it. I have a tandem pump. I love it. It's been a life changer. But the issue right now with the technology is that it's not available to everyone at affordable prices, even if you have insurance. And it's really just heartbreaking, because people should have this stuff. It's not like it's not made for a certain kind of people with diabetes. It's made for everyone. It should be made accessible for everyone who has diabetes. And so that's kind of another kind of diatribe that I often think about is, these things are great, but are they helping the people that they should be helping? So, but yeah, I have had it, and I'm going to have it again soon.
You make an excellent point. It's out of reach for so many. Jake, can I ask, if you don't mind sharing, do you know like what your diabetes costs you per month? Would you say, like, for medication or ballpark, what are you having to come up with that the average person isn't to cover your diabetes?
Right. So right now I'm paying about $90 for maybe a month supply of insulin. And then I've got my pump supplies, which are for 3 months, it's $400. And that's after insurance. And then if I have my CGM for the sensors, that's another $200, $300 for like 4 sensors per month. So it adds up.
You're talking like $300, $400, $500 per month.
Yeah.
I would guess. Wow. That's out of reach for many.
So you have to make choices, unfortunately. And it's, I figure I need my infusion set, which, it essentially attaches the pump to your body. That's what the infusion site is for people who might not know. And then you have the cartridge, which goes in the pump, and that's what carries the insulin. And then the CGM is the continuous glucose, which tells you what your numbers are. Every 5 minutes, it pings and it shows the direction up and down, and that your blood sugar levels are. So it's, in my case, it was like, well, I can I can prick my fingers, and that's a viable alternative than not using my pump at all because I need that infusion site. So those are the type of choices I find myself making when the costs do get kind of unreachable. But
Yeah. I've heard of people even kind of, what do they call it? Insulin sparing, where they cut down their insulin doses
yeah,
too, to try and stretch it out.
It's unfortunate. I don't blame anyone, and I know there's changes that have been made, and I'm very thankful for the people who are recognize the problem that is caused by the high costs. It's when it meets you, you kind of really recognize that, wow, this is a new burden on top of having to deal with the condition. Still hopeful that one day this stuff's going to be available to everyone, and it's going to be even better. So I'm a forever an optimist, I guess. And
there's whole programs here at the Department of Public Health and Human Services dedicated to trying to get better care for people and help things get in reach, and organizations like the Association of Diabetes Care and Education Specialists and American Diabetes Association that's campaigning hard. And we actually, nowadays, I think it's the Montana Youth Diabetes Association or Alliance. They have a summer camp for kids that get diagnosed with diabetes. So there's more and more happening for sure. Jake, do you have any other stories that you want to share from your diabetes with your experiences?
Yeah, I've run the gamut with them. I found out sometimes that when I'm in a low, I will get aggressive.
So more than just hangry, like some of us, how we get hangry, or is it like?
This was probably 10-ish years ago or so. I was low, and I woke up, and I was starting to get kind of come to, and for whatever reason, I looked up my kitchen window, and I decided to run through my kitchen window. And I shattered the glass. My arms were all scratched up, and so I had to replace the window, and I had to kind of heal myself. And it was nothing major. I didn't break anything. But it was kind of embarrassing because I had a broken window that I caused myself, and even though I didn't really remember it, so it was always the lows have been my kind of downfall. I haven't been a person who's kind of averages in the 200s or whatever. I'm always down in the 60s and 50s is where I would get in trouble. Like I was saying earlier, you learn from your mistakes, and I've made plenty of them with my diabetes, and I wish I could say I didn't, and I wish I could say I was better about it, but you live and learn, and I feel like I'm at a good place now, and I feel like it's been something that definitely has been, you're thrown into the deep end, and kind of you find help, you find people who are your allies, and you just kind of work to be the best you can, and sometimes it's painful.
It gives you a whole new appreciation for what it can do to you. I mean,
it does, and it was embarrassing at the time, but I look at it as, well, I've learned and I've grown from that, and thankfully the damage wasn't worse. I don't know. It's like sometimes you can become a different person, and if people aren't aware of you are diabetic, they might think of you a lot differently. And I've always made sure that people around me know. Even when I started at the library, I said, I am diabetic. I may act a little weird once in a while, and if I do, I need this. Or if I'm feeling tired, Jake, check yourself. Are you okay? And I have a lot of really good people around me who recognize that, and I say, Jake, are you okay? And it's been really good, and like I said, my pump has been like a game changer. It honestly has. And my mom even said to my grandma, she said, we were always a little worried about Jake, but since he's got his pump, I feel less worried about him, and it's really been excellent. That it's been such a help to kind of controlling things. So that's really a nice thing that I wish I had sooner. But yeah, so it can be maintained. It's just it's not easy to do.
You got to stay on it constantly, 24/7 job. Yeah. Do you have anybody in your family that has type 1 diabetes? I know sometimes there's a genetic component.
I do, not in my immediate family. I do have family members who are type 2 diabetic, which is different type of thing. But not my immediate family, my extended family. I do have some people who are type 1 diabetic. But yeah, it's always interesting that type 1 diabetes, they're still not sure what causes it, like why someone gets it. And it's, it's an immune disorder. But that's about all they know. They don't know that, well, if you do this X, or if they have some theories, they have some theories with, well, if you're something to do if you're not breastfed enough or something, but that's not really been proven as far as I know. So we don't really know what causes type 1 diabetes as much as type 2. Like you can pretty much point to type 2 and say, well, this and this and this will cause, but type 1, it's kind of more of a mystery, and which is very interesting to me. Like why it causes, your own body to attack your own cells. So
What kind of advice would you give people newly diagnosed?
yeah, absolutely. So firstly is obviously listen to what the experts say, because they're going to give you a good starting point to go from. But recognize that it's really an emotional journey that you're going on. You're going to feel angry. You're going to ask yourself, why do I have this? What did I do to deserve to have this? Those are all perfectly normal questions you're going to ask. And that's just part of it. You work through the process to get through. But also know that there's support, and also recognize the seriousness of it, and be mindful that you can get through it, and you can manage it. You can have a normal life. You have to make adjustments, and you have to be committed to those adjustments. And you'll be okay.
So what are some of the adjustments that you would say are the biggest that people have to adjust to when they get diagnosed?
Definitely your diet. That's and it's not even that, well, like, oh, I can't eat cake ever again, or I can't have soda ever again. It's being very deliberate in what you eat, and knowing how many carbs you're eating versus how much insulin you're taking to cover, and knowing how to count carbs, and knowing when you go out to a restaurant, feeling comfortable to ask the waiter, saying, do you have any dietary information on these meals? Just this types of things that you wouldn't normally do, because if you don't have diabetes, you're going to go out to a restaurant, enjoy lasagna, and not think anything that's going to mess up your evening. So you have to kind of get over a fear of needles if you have it, especially it depends on what, if you get a pump, and maybe not necessarily, but you do have to poke yourself. If you're poking your finger, you're taking injections. So it's unless you have a pump and a CGM, then you don't have to do those. So that's nice, but it's something to recognize, where you might have to kind of get used to that, and just kind of know that there's going to be big changes in how you feel. It can affect your emotions. So if your blood sugar is at 72 and you're feeling like you're cranky, you're angry, or whatever, check yourself always. And it's just kind of learn to understand yourself and what your body is telling you, but also know that you might feel like you're low. Still check yourself, because you might not be. It's you're just because you feel it doesn't mean it's true. I've had that happen a lot, where I feel, oh, I'm feeling low, I'm going to eat this Skittles, and then I check myself, and then I was 320. So it don't always trust how you feel.
Yeah, fantastic, and good appreciation for all of that and what everyone with type 1 diabetes has to do. Absolutely. Well, definitely a lot of great information, Jake, and we really appreciate you being willing to share everything in your story. And especially hypoglycemia. I have a newfound appreciation for that after listening to your story tonight.
On behalf of myself and our podcast crew behind the scenes, we want to give a huge thank you to Jake for stepping forward and volunteering to share his story and life with type 1 diabetes. He's had some interesting experiences. And thank you for listening to this episode of Talking Health in the 406, where we're one community under the big sky. If you would like more information on what was heard today, visit our website at talkinghealthinthe406.mt.gov. And if you haven't already, be sure and like, subscribe, and share our podcast with your friends and loved ones. And until next time, take care.